Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this video we're going to continue to work on the Konig race car, and more specific the rear suspension. And before we start, there's a few things I would like to mention. And one of the subscribers asked me if I could show the torch that I used to make the cable shoes in the previous episode. So that's what I'm going to show you. There was another question or a comment about you should never take things completely apart on a race car because you're never going to get the geometry back together properly. I will answer that one. And then finally, I really would like to thank Dave. Dave is a guy that I met on YouTube actually, and last week he came over and from Austria, believe it or not. So that was a long drive for him, and he picked up some spare parts that I had, and I gladly gave it to him, and you might remember that video. So we had a long chat and we got along very well. So now Dave has become a good friend. So Dave, thank you so much for your visit. And I also got a nice box of really Austrian chocolates. Those, well, they are gone already. And Dave is really into Jaguar and Minis and some other cars. But have a look on his channel because it is certainly worthwhile looking at it. And the link is below in this video. And Dave was so kind to give me a voucher for a restaurant just around the corner actually. So Dave, we go in there tonight and we will enjoy the dinner, my girlfriend and I, and we'll think about you and have a drink on you. So thanks a lot, Dave, and I'll see you around. Another subscriber asked me what kind of a torch I was using for welding those cable shoes or soldering those cable shoes. Well, this is it. You know, you can see on the size of my hand, this is fairly small. And the torch itself is also not very big. And it's very handy. It runs on oxygen and it runs on a mixture of gas. I think it's kind of a propane gas, but it's a mixture of three gases together. And there was a comment from one of the subscribers that you should never take a car completely apart like I've done because you never get the geometry right. Well, I don't agree with this. If you do it right from the start and you build up progressively, you can get the geometry perfectly again to what you want it to be. And you'll see that in one of my upcoming videos as soon as the Konig race car is complete. You will see on how we're doing the complete alignment, both for the caster and the camber, but also for the toe in or the toe out, whatever that is. And also the weight balance. All these things will come up and you'll see on how we're going to build that up. But of course, I have to reassemble the rear end first. So, without any further ado, let's get on with it. On the trolley, we've got all the parts that are making up the right rear wheel. And it goes from the shocks to the wishbones, to the disc, to the brake pads, to the brake caliper, to the upright, and to all the UV, CV joints, you know, wheel bearing, all of that. And in previous episodes we have shot blasted all this, we have powder coated a lot of the parts that had to be powder coated, we checked all the joints and the connections. We've got some new parts as well because I decided to go for a new bearing. I also decided to go for new CV joints. So all this now has to come back together on the car, and this is what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to start with the shock absorber, then I'm going to install the wishbones, and then I will install the uprights. And during that whole process, we'll do some very basic alignments so that the rear wheel will be perfectly aligned with the frame of the car, because I want to have that rear end first perfectly in symmetry with the line or the chassis of the car. I know later on I'll change things, but right now that will be my reference. So this is the lever arm for the shock, and I have this steel part that goes inside. I have it slightly greased, because I like to have things slightly greased. And then we just put the bolts up, and if we can get it aligned, of course. Now I have cleaned the thread of all these bolts before, and often I use new bolts. Okay. Alright, so let's see how that feels. A little bit of play on it, but that's okay. But up and down it feels good. Maybe I can tighten it a little bit more. Yeah, that's good. Alright, the shock goes right here, and I am not going to worry right now about the preload because that's typically what you want to set. But I'm not going to set this one right now. That's just something for later. So let me remove this bolt and put it through there, and then we should have the shock connected on the bottom, and then we connect it on the top. Now I have the shock mounted with the adjustment towards the outside, so that's the stiffness of the shock. And I'm using self-looking nuts for that. All right, I'll tighten it up in a few seconds. Now let's do the top. Now you will have noticed that the spring should never be like this, right? This is really bad if you have this, but that's just because I have not adjusted the preload. So I'm going to push down the shock. There we go. And these are the rings where you're setting your preload. So right now the spring is very loose. Suspension is really all the way at the end. So I'm going to push up the spring a bit, up to the upper ring. And then I'm going to slightly adjust my preload. But this is not really preload. I'm just going to make sure that the spring isn't loose so nothing can jump out, because that would be bad. I'm just going to put some very slight pressure so things stay in place. There we go. Now afterwards, once we put the car on the scale, we'll correct this really how it's supposed to be. Yeah, but for now, that will do. Adjusted the preload rings so that the spring sits in the shuttle here, just to make sure that nothing gets loose, right? So now I need to tighten up the bolt here. Unfortunately, I can't not use a socket because things are in the way, so I'm not going to show you every bolt that I'm going to bolt down, because that would be a bit too much, right? Now here I need to connect a rod which is going to the stabilization bar, but right now we don't have the stabilization bar in yet, so I'm just gonna install it but leave it fairly loose because I can't really connect it yet on the top. The stabilization bar, well, that is only gonna, or torsion bar as they call it sometimes, we'll put this in as soon as the other side is connected. But I'll hook it up anyway, so it's ready to go. If you put a washer up, you got to be careful that it's not too big, because otherwise it may restrict the movement. So keep that in mind. So here is our lower wishbone, and I kind of pre-placed it on both sides. And it's important that this is installed correctly, because I want to have the wheel parallel actually to the frame. So you need to make adjustments, and the adjustments you can do is actually right here on those joints there. Those are adjustable, so I'm going to start off with having them fairly deep, and I will measure the total distance and make sure both of them are the same. And again, I might have to disconnect all this again and readjust it. But at least you can get pretty close, and we'll see that once we get the wheel hub up, we can see more of that. So let's measure that and see how far that gets. If you wonder what these patches are, this is just protection material because the flex hose will come along here and tie wrap down for the brakes. So this is the ball joint on the lower wishbone that will hold the upright. Now, I'm turning it in as much as I can, as deep as possible, because with this one, we will have to adjust the camber. So the more you bring this out, the more negative camber you're going to have, and the more you put it in and the top one out, the more positive camber you're going to have. And this is about 87. So let's check the other side. All right, so this is now a little bit less, about a millimeter. So I need to bring the other one out a bit or bring this guy in a bit. The towel that I have here is just to protect things, so let's see. I need to get this one more inwards so it matches up. That is why I didn't connect anything solidly yet. You can count the distance on the threads and work that way, but I'm just going to try and see now what we got here. Now, okay, that's good. This has got shorter. Yeah, this is now the same. So I guess we are good. Now before I'm going to put in this lower wishbone, I'm going to clean out these holes a bit, on both on the left and on the right. And I'm going to use a little steel brush to do that. And that makes it easier to install things and remove things afterwards. And all the bolts that I'm putting through the chassis or in this whole assembly, I always put some corrosion block on it, which is kind of a blue grease. Here we go, see that? That's the grease you have. And I'll just rub it on the bolts. I've pre-placed the bolts so it makes it a bit easier to deal with. All right, and then it's a bit of a squeeze always. Okay, so this is better. Let me try to position that a bit. That's it. It's a bit of work to get it straight in, but it's not too bad. And again, I might have to correct this later on again. So I'm not going to bolt this down too hard, because we want to make sure that the wheel is absolutely parallel to the frame. Now the distance here is the same as that distance, so normally I think we should be quite all right, but you never know, and we'll see at the end, and we'll see what we have to do to adjust this. So let's lock these guys into place, or at least a little bit. Knowing very well that I may have to loosen it up again. So next up is the upper wishbone, and that goes right in here. And therefore I need to put this bar inside. And I already have kind of greased it up, so that should be not much of an issue to get it in. So let's see if we can get it in. All right. Now there's a little hole there, as you can see. And that allows you to put a screwdriver in or something to hold it while you're turning the bolts. Let's see if we can force this in. Shouldn't be that hard, really. Well, it's a bit tougher than I thought it was. So I'm going to give it a small knock so it opens up a little bit. So let's see if we can get it in. Yeah, see. Sometimes a little bit of force helps. Not too much, of course. Okay. Now I can get the other side in. So let's lock this in place. I have both wishbones in place, as you can see. They are not really hard, they are slightly stiff, but not really stiff. So now we can put actually the upright up. So here we have another rod that we need to install properly before we can actually connect the upright. This is the tow bar. So this will allow me to adjust the toe in or toe out of the rear wheels. Sometimes things do take a little bit of force. Now the good thing about this tow bar is that you can adjust it. You don't need to remove things. See, this is how you do it. This is my toe. So I'm going to set it to the absolute minimum. Not sure where it will end up, but we'll see. And next we're going to install the rod which is connecting the upper wishbone to the pivoting arm of the shock absorber. And then we connect the other side to the top part, right here, to the top of the wishbone. And that should just go in fairly smoothly, I hope. But then again, you never know, because we have been powder coating things, so that always causes a bit of a thickness increase. But okay, it is fairly easy to get this in. So, all right, so this is good. I can now put the bolt up, and then we should be good on this side as well. Alrighty, so I'm gonna put a washer up, and then we should be good on this side. And a silver-looking nut. And all I need to do now is tie it in place. And again, this rod, I can turn it so it will move up the upper wishbone or lower it. So this is the real linkage to the shock absorber. So what we just installed is the linkage, which is connecting the lever of the shock absorber actually to the upper wishbone. So let me lock down all these nuts, and then we will install the upright, because now we are ready for it. So now it's time for the upright, and this is the upright. This is where the wheel hub is connected to. So let's quickly install this. I do like to use self-locking nuts. It is an extra safety. And then in the bottom, I have this big bolt that is holding it in place. Let's lock it in place. And then I'll show you on how you can adjust the toe, because some people asked me that question. You'll see adjusting the toe in or toe out is pretty easy. Not complex whatsoever. Now you notice that I have not locked this down yet. And that is for good reasons, because with this bolt here, I'm going to adjust actually the camber. And for now, I just left it all the way in as far as I could. So we can do that later. That's why I'm not going to lock it all the way down, because I might have to undo it. Now, let me show you something on how you can adjust the toe, because that is interesting. This bar right here is what we call the toe bar, and I can shorten it or extend it. And depending on what I do, you will see the upright moving inwards or outwards. So this is going to be the bar to adjust toe in or toe out. Let me put a wrench on it, and then you'll see it. Alright, so not sure which way it's going now, but see, now it's going out. See how that moves out? Now that of course is extreme, and this way it's actually moving in. So this is how we're going to adjust the toe in or the toe out. The only thing to watch out for with these things is that the threaded part should be far enough into the piece, because otherwise you may be up for a surprise. So now it's time to install the wheel bearing, and first of all we will install this panel here, because this is what's going to hold the brake caliper, and then we will have the wheel bearing coming up like so. So let me put the bolts through the back, and hopefully this will work without too much hassle. Okay. Number one. Now, it's so much more pleasant to work on a clean car than the way it was before initially, because it was so dirty and greasy, and that it was really not a lot of fun to work on. But now it's a pleasure to work on. All right, so here we go. This is the wheel bearing. Because this was a bit of a challenge to find the right parts on this car. It's a mixture of Volkswagen and Fiat parts. Oh, that looks quite good. So I'm just going to put the remaining bolts and then we're going to lock it down. So next are these studs that need to be installed so we can actually connect the wheels to it. Now these studs, I'm going to bolt them in there with a counter nut, but also I'm going to put some Loctite on them. So that is always a good idea, put some Loctite on it. Just put a bit on the thread, not a hell of a lot, just a little bit. That's what I mean with a counter nut. So you put two nuts against each other, you lock them in place, and then you will have something to turn the stud really powerful inside and lock it in place. But before I do so, I'll need to install another stud somewhere because I need to be able to hold it. Let's see if I do it here. It might work. There we go. Now I can hold. No, wrong direction. I should have kept it in the other place. But no, this will work. All right. So this works. All right, that's good enough. And now we unlock. Now let me do the next one. And then we can continue with the brake disc. So the studs are on, so now we could actually install the disc. But before we go into install the disc, I will have a quick check on the camber, and I have a camber meter here. So this we can place on the hub, and let me rotate it so we have it level, and then see what we have now. Now of course the suspension is in its lowest possible position, and that is just because it's all hanging down. Of course that will change if it's moving up or down because it scribes an arc, right? So let me show you what we have right now. So let me position it really level on the side here, and what I see is a 2 degrees negative camber. So that actually means that the top of the wheels is pointing towards the center of the car. If the suspension would go upwards, that will certainly change. So let me try to adjust a few things just to show you on how that would actually change. You can see how it's shifting up on the load to about 3 degrees already. And that's just the way these things are working. So I can adjust my camber by a single rod, and I'll show you what rod it is. I can also do it in the bottom of the upright, but let me show you where I'm changing it so then you have a pretty good idea of what is happening. So with the top rod, I can adjust the toe, and this is what we call the toe rod or the toe bar. I can move that in different directions. So if I move it like this, then I'm going to get more toe in. You will see this part here moving inwards, so that is my toe bar. So here we go. See, now I'm exaggerating. So that's my toe. This is where I will adjust the toe. Right now I don't need to do it, but I just want to show you where that is. And then this bar right here is what is going to affect my camber. And with this guy, I'm going to raise or lower the wishbone, and that will affect, of course, my camber. So this is how that works. See if I can do it by hand now. See how that is going up? And then, of course, if it goes up, the camber is changing. So the more I go up, the more the wheel moves that direction, so the more negative camber I get. So this is how you can adjust this very easily. Of course, on the bottom of the upright, you can also adjust it. So this is the, let me call it the big adjustment, and this is the fine adjustment. And these are the things we're going to do once we start working on the geometry of the car. So here's the new disc. Now I know this is not a vented disc, but it doesn't have to be. Let's see if I can actually hold it in place with some screws, so I don't need to put the wheel on. Some small holes there. And then at the end, we'll put up the spacer, and then the wheels go on together with the bolts. But we still have to fit the brake caliper, of course. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to degrease the disc. And please pay no attention to these bolts. They are just there to hold the disc in place for now. So now we're going to install the brake caliper, and for that, first I need to install this bracket here, which is kind of pretty heavy. We have it shot blasted before, and then we powder coated it, because I like my things to be clean. Let's see. Sometimes it's a bit tricky to get these brakes in, but they should be okay. I hope everything fits, because we got lots of new parts. So to bolt down the top bolt, it's a bit difficult, so I have this special wrench to do that, and I've had this for at least 30 years or so. Can't remember where I bought it, but it's really helpful. So now it's time for the brake caliper, and this can be a little bit of an annoyance to get it in. It's not the first time I do this, but it's always a little bit difficult. So the brake pads are going right here. That's where they go. Like so. There's one in the back. Oops, the wrong direction. Yeah, it's time I quit, because it's been a long day. And now I'm going to try to put the brake caliper in. Now, the gold stuff is what we call copper paste. That always helps. All right. There we go. And now I need to push it back so that these springs are pushed backwards, and I need to slide in these, I don't know what you call them, but these shims, or let me call it shims for now, right? You probably could put a clamp up like this, so that would make it easier. So let me try to do that. I'm going to try to squeeze that together with a clamp. Here's that clamp, and I think that will just work. Let's see, can we get it in? It's got to go in like this. Yes. There we go. That's one. And I still have to do the bottom one as well, so that might be a little bit more tricky, so I have to move the clamp a bit. So I'm going to use my soft hammer to get this in. And that's about it. A little bit more. Yeah. All right. Good. So now I still need to lock these slides to these springs, and then we should be good. All right. So to lock these shims in place, I'm going to use a split pin. It goes through like so, and then we're going to bend it over the spring. Of course, we do one in the back as well. The next step is, of course, to put the spacer up. And now we can put the wheel up, and then we are kind of finished on this side. Of course, I still have to connect the brake hose to the brake caliper and get all the air out of the brakes, but this is something once we've done the other side, because I have one common brake cylinder in the front for both. So let me put the wheel up so we can see how it looks like. All right. So I think this is going to work just fine, but you never know. If you put all new elements up or new parts, if everything is exactly the same size. Of course, I did double check on it, but again, you never know. Because it might be that the rim is touching the brake caliper, you know, stuff like that. And of course, this is not final. We still have to do all the alignment, but this side is as good as complete. So now I will do the second side. So let's see how that runs. Oh, I think this looks quite good. I think I have a bump in the rim. So that might be something we need to fix. Although the edge of the tire is not affected, so good. See, now I'm just going to show you one more time the effect of the toe link, and now you can really see it, how the tire is moving, right? So folks, we are at the end of this video, and I hope you enjoyed the rebuild of the rear suspension. We still have to connect, of course, the brake lines. We still have to connect the drive shaft, but that is something we'll do when the other side is done. So now I'm going to spend my Sunday on fixing the other side, and then we will do on Monday, I'll start on the drive shaft and the differential and the brakes, and by then the car should be in a drivable condition. And after that, we still have to do the body work. I'm going to do the complete respray, and hopefully by the end of the week all this is done. I still need to get a new chain though, and sprockets. All right, so please by all means comment, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.